All right, so I think we're going to get started now. I just want to make sure we stay punctual on time. So welcome everybody to the Ooh La La webinar series. This is our first one for 2017. So happy New Year to everyone. Glad to see you here. For everyone that's coming to one of our webinars for the first time, welcome. And to everyone that I'm seeing as a returning name, welcome back. I'm glad to see your names and emails here again, and people are hopefully going to find this just as interesting as some of the previous ones we had done. Before we get started, I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping. One, the session is being recorded, so you can relax, sit down, enjoy your lunch. If you're having lunch, you don't necessarily need to take notes or make sure you copy down what's on each of the slides. A recording of the webinar, as well as a recording, as well as the slides themselves, will be emailed out to everyone tomorrow. So you can sit back, relax, but certainly don't feel shy about participating. I want to make sure everyone is engaged in this, and obviously you can ask questions, you can engage with the slides themselves. You'll see a little chat box on the bottom right corner of GoToWebinar. There's a chat box and a question box. You can actually submit your questions. We'll be getting to those. There's a Q&A session at the end, and if you want to sort of participate and say something on one of the topics that we're discussing, certainly don't be shy. I don't want this to be a session where it's just me talking the entire time, so I want you to feel free to participate as well. So with that being said, let's get started on today's webinar. Usually we do a bit of a how-to series or kind of talking about a new technology. Today we're actually going to be looking at something forward-thinking and looking at the top 10 predictions for higher ed in 2017. This is a super exciting topic. I think we're all very excited about what's going to be coming down the pike this year. Lots of big changes in 2016, and we're going to see from student success, from ed tech, from public policy, all these different facets of higher education, what's going to be happening in 2017. So on that note, here's what our agenda is going to look like today. It's going to take anywhere from about 35 to 45 minutes to go through our webinar, and then we've sort of reserved about 15 minutes or so for your question and answers. So we're going to start with a quick look back on 2016, or some of the major changes, major news points that we saw in 2016. And then we're going to start looking at 2017's top 10. But we're going to break it down into different aspects of higher ed. So first, we're going to be looking at the impact on public policy. We're going to be looking at administrating higher education in 2017. So I'm sure this is going to be exceptionally interesting to those of you that are either new in this field or have been in this field for quite a while and know how to navigate some of these. We're going to be looking at ed tech, obviously, which is always changing, always exciting. And so what's coming down the pike in 2017 is no different. Then we're going to look at student success. This is something that I've separated out as a different section because it is such a tremendous focus for colleges and universities now. And it's important to see what specifically in student success is going to be coming down. And then towards the end, we're going to look at how we're navigating through all of this change. So even though we'll be looking at each of these separately, there's points to take away from them individually, and then something as a whole to take away as we look at what the industry or the structure of the industry is going to look like at the end of 2017. And then, like I mentioned, there's going to be a Q&A session at the end, but by no means is that restricted just to the end. So if you have any questions, if you want to make sure your voice is heard, please feel free to submit those through the question box on the right. So who is the person on the other end of this line who's talking to you today? My name is Haider. I've been working in higher education for over 10 years now. I have my bachelor's in economics and I completed my MBA, both from institutions in Montreal at McGill University and the John Molson School of Business, I should say. I'm currently the Director of Content and Strategic Partnerships here at Ooh La La, which means I get the distinct pleasure of being the one to do these presentations for you. But I've also done these at case conferences, and you're also going to find me, if you're attending NASPA this year, in the middle of March, we're going to be doing a booth and a session there as well. So if that's something you're interested in, I'd love to connect and discuss that further. And the best two ways to connect with me are either on Twitter, you can find me @_Hader, or directly through email, hader@oolalamobile.com. And what is Oolala Mobile? So just a brief on who we are as a company before we get started. We've been in the education technology space for a very, very long time now, since about 2010, and we provide a complete student experience management system. So that means everything from the mobile application that binds all the students' resources, services, and everything on campus together, to providing Campus Cloud, which is an administrative tool for the backend, to providing reports and analytics for you to make more informed decisions about your student experience. And everything about our app and our platform is built with integration and efficacy in mind. So we have partners in over 175 institutions now. This is all across the globe, institutions of all shapes and sizes, everything from small private institutions to large public schools. And one thing that we're exceptionally proud of is that students love using our app. Every time we've done surveys, we found that typically over 90% of students surveyed say they will recommend the app to their friends, and that's something that's of huge pride to us. But we're also proud of our technology partners and being featured in them. So you've probably seen us on EDUCAUSE, TechCrunch. We're referenced in Forbes 30 under 30 for education and campus technology. So just a little bit about the company there. But really today is about the future of higher ed in 2017. And the best way to understand the future is kind of looking at how we got here in the first place. So we'll take a quick look back at 2016 and some of the big changes that happened this year. So first and foremost, I think this is something that you've probably all seen in your institutions: diversity and inclusion, not just in society, but in our colleges and universities. We're front and center. This was referenced specifically with the growth of chief diversity officers, multicultural diversity offices, and departments being set up in institutions, but also in a governmental level with the Supreme Court upholding affirmative action laws earlier this year. Another thing we saw that was very, very prevalent was an awareness coming towards sexual assault on campus and sexual awareness. We saw this with Title IX, Title IX officers coming into place at a lot of these institutions and being a very core focus in terms of what institutions are doing for student safety on campus. One huge part we saw on the IT side in the back end was the growth of cloud services and cloud platforms. Typically these are used often in consumer services with companies like Dropbox or Box, and now we're starting to see institutions start to take advantage of this as space and hardware becomes more and more expensive. Cloud services in 2016 really were a huge growth industry. And then second to that is really the evolving role of the CIO on campus. And this is something that we've seen not just in our industry, but the role of technology and innovation and information in all industries has really, really exploded. And so the CIO is becoming a much more strategic partner in instituting the institution's vision and their strategic objectives. And then as far as like mobile usage goes, this was something that just struck out. 2016 was the year that internet usage on mobile actually outstripped that on desktops. So just to give you an idea of where we are before we move forward. I'm noticing here there are a few questions, so I'm just going to see if we can address those quickly. Let's see. I see there's a request here for a US phone number. Just in case anybody else has that, I am going to add a US phone number very quickly here. Excuse me for 1 second. Just want to make sure it's possible. It seems like it won't be possible after the fact. So I just want to make sure everyone has the ability. If you don't need to dial in to actually listen to the webinar. So as long as your computer speakers are on, you should be able to hear the webinar clearly. So I'm hoping that takes care of anyone that's having any technical difficulties. As long as your computer speakers are on, you shouldn't need to dial in to actually listen in. Okay, so I'm going to continue on from there. Just in case anyone else has a problem on that, please do write it in. I just want to make sure everyone can hear hear the presentation today. Okay, so moving on, just going to look, okay, we're going to move on to 2017, and we're going to start looking at forward-looking impacts on higher education. And the first area we're going to look at is towards public policy. I know the image is a little jarring, but I really think it's one that lends a bit of gravitas to our incoming president here. So the first thing that we think is going to actually be a huge impact in 2017 is on accreditation. Now, we saw last year with the closure of ITT and Corinthians and other for-profit institutions that were accredited by ASICS. That is going to have long-lasting impact, I think, moving forward. And what we're going to see, because the Obama administration was so focused on clamping down on some of these for-profit institutions, we're actually going to see a change in tact, I think, with the new education policy and economic policy coming into place. Betsy DeVos appears to be taking a different course of action as far as accrediting processes and standards go. I think what they are afraid of is preventing all of these for-profit institutions to actually run to other regulatory agencies and getting accredited from them. And the way to address that means actually addressing accreditation as a whole. So one thing we'll note coming in 2017 is that federal funding is going to take a very, very strong role in how accreditation works. Because accreditation departments are non-governmental and the government cannot directly affect them, the way that they're going to influence policy there is likely going to be through federal funding. And as we've seen in 2016, funding itself was a very, very difficult sort of mandate for a lot of institutions to get around. Funding is going to be able to control accreditation and how that takes place in 2017 in a large part. So that's one aspect of public policy that we can expect to really come under the microscope. The other is actually community colleges, and this is something I would love to hear from other community colleges. You know, if you know of colleagues that are experiencing this, or if you yourself are, please feel free to chat that in as well. You know, community colleges make up more than half of all the students in the United States that go on to get some post-secondary education. So they play a huge role in higher education in the United States, not just for people going just to community college, but for people that go on for attaining higher level degrees, bachelor's, master's, PhDs as well. And with the focus on the economic policy that is being put forth by this new administration, technical training and workforce reentry are going to be very, very pivotal. And this is where community colleges are going to play a huge role. And so they're going to be in the forefront, I think, of what they're doing to actually affect economic policy and job creation and workforce reentry. We can see this already in the way that the campaign had played out back in 2016, and the focus on different types of education and on non-college educated people and people coming for the first time to university. So I think this is going to be a huge part, and community colleges need to be prepared for playing a much more important role in the economic policy in the country. Now, the good thing about getting attention and getting national sort of spotlight is it gets more eyes, gets more enrollment, gets more funding, but at the same time, attention with it also brings more scrutiny, requires more transparency, and requires more accountability. So this is something community colleges are going to have to become comfortable with in being able to report, in being able to hold themselves accountable to federal funding, in being able to actually affect student outcomes. So these are items 1 and 2 in the top 10. And these are in the public policy sphere. So before I continue, I want to make sure there's no questions on these areas. If not, we'll move on to the next one. Perfect. So number 3 is actually something that's very near and dear to my heart. I love it. Education technology, obviously, which is why we're in this industry. So where are we seeing EdTech go in 2017? Obviously, I think this could, along with the rest of them, really have its own top 10 list. But 3 big things that we're going to focus on are starting with multiple device penetration. So as I mentioned at the start, mobile is actually outstripping internet usage compared to desktops. But what's really happening is 2016 was the largest growth year for ownership of connected devices. So we're not just talking about desktops and laptops now. We're talking about tablets, we're talking about Fitbits, wearable technology. All of these internet-enabled devices have now started operating on a cross-platform system, which means there's a lot more synergy, there's information sharing between them. So the app that operates on your phone now has a web presence, but also has a presence on your wearable, on your wrist. It also affects your Alexa or your home connected device. It also affects anything that's connected to the internet as far as tablets go or home technology goes, light switches, security, Wi-Fi platforms at home. All of these are now connected in a way that they were never before. And so multiple device penetration is reaching a level that we had never seen before. What is the impact of this on higher education? Number 1, students are much more discerning and categorical in how they use their devices. So it's no longer just a laptop and a web page now to deliver information and putting everything there. You know, smartphones have become a core communication tool, but smartphones are no longer just the only way that they're using to communicate. They actually use their wearables or watches as extensions of themselves. So they're able to see, you know, how many paces they walked today, how long it took them to get from one spot to another, incoming push notifications. Rather than having to pull a smartphone out, they can see those on their watch now. So what we have to think about is, how are we delivering information? How are we communicating with students now in a way that's connected, in a way that's actually tailored and targeted to how they're consuming that information? The day of just using a cell phone is at its peak right now, but it's not where the story ends. Tablets, wearables, internet connected devices are actually going to explode in 2017. So that's something that's going to be very, very interesting to keep an eye on. Number 4, this is something that's very exciting, and institutions have already started working on this, but we foresee this to be an even more expanding reality in 2017. More and more institutions were experimenting with this in 2016. But in 2017, virtual reality, and by the way, not just virtual reality, but augmented reality, are really going to start to be applied, going from early adopters and just experimental technology to actually having, consumer and student application. We've seen the explosion of consumer hardware already. So Google Cardboard, the HTC Vive, Oculus Rift, all of these being out there in the consumer realm are just going to precipitate the growth of this within our industry. Students are coming to college now already comfortable with these means. So if you think about someone in a foreign country, and I'm going to use mine as an example, coming from Pakistan, if you wanted to take a tour of campus, the only option was to either see the website and see the campus there, or do a little Google map of the campus, or buy a plane ticket and actually fly to campus to see it. Now, campuses are already doing virtual reality tours for incoming students. The enrollment admissions offices are doing entire virtual tours for communities in some of these countries where kids are not able to come and spend the money to fly to campus. And it gives them a sense of what it's like to be on campus, gives them a sense of what the values and the actual vibe of campus life is like in a way that a web platform or even a mobile platform could never do. So An example of this is from Davidson College, and the CIO there actually noted that Davidson is actively exploring, both administrative and academic applications to transform the experience of education. So when you think about sitting inside a classroom, it's not just about the kids that are sitting physically in those desks. How do we get the online learning students, how do we get the distance learning students to feel even more engaged in those classroom activities? And virtual reality and augmented reality are going to go a long way in 2017 to actually making that an experience for them that's even more enhanced. Number 5, I mentioned it just towards the end of virtual reality, but it really goes as an extension of that. Because virtual reality is increasing and the cost of traveling is so expensive, we're going to see a lot more online learning and non-traditional credentials. We already saw micro-credentials becoming more and more prevalent in the workforce. It started first with, project management, Lean, Six Sigma. These are all non-university, non-traditional credentials, but they're very established in the space. Now we're moving towards even more microcredits. So things like badges, online certifications are signals for employers that people have, on their own time, outside of a formal setting, undertaken learning, practical learning, have established technical skills and know-how in a way that a 4-year or 2-year formal education can never provide those individuals that can't afford it. So we saw MOOCs, which were massive open online courses, grow in 2016. But what we can expect in 2017 is this to really expand into MOOCs. Those collection of courses will actually become open online degrees. So if you were simply just getting a course from one university and another course from a different university, I think over time in 2017 we're going to see all of those coming together to be able to provide an entire degree online. And so there's an expectation, going back to public policy as well, that federal funding for these non-traditional programs like coding boot camps or 3D printing, building non-traditional physical spaces, all of these sorts of things are going to increase in 2017. And so it's a very exciting time to be a part of EdTech. And it's something I think higher education as a whole, because it is oftentimes not an early adopter of technology or not necessarily adopting technology as soon as it comes out, this is an area where higher education can actually lead and make sure that these first generation students and students coming to college for the first time have access to these signals to employers that would allow them to get jobs, allow them to get better education, better training for a 21st century workforce. And so that concludes sort of the ed tech aspect of our top 10, and we're about halfway through. So I want to make sure if anyone has any questions at this point, what did you think about public policy and ed tech in 2017? Is there anything you think we missed in 2017 for ed tech or as far as public policy that you'd like me to point out for others? Feel free to chat it in. I'm happy to give you a voice. So if you want to chat that in, I'm going to take a couple of minutes just to hold on and wait and see if someone has something to say here. So just chat in your questions here, and we'll get started very soon and see if we have any questions there. I got a question here on what is up with GE. I'm just hoping you can elaborate on that. I just want to make sure I get the question correctly. So if you want to just elaborate on your question there, I can address that. So there's a question here on MOOCs and whether or not they were kind of a flash in the pan and whether that trend was actually decreasing. That's a very good question. I don't have any data on hand, but what we have seen is more and more institutions are actually jumping on board. And although this is something that I don't have the data particularly here, but I have read that although the growth in North America and in first world countries has slowed for MOOCs, online courses and attendance for those courses across the globe have actually been increasing. So people that didn't traditionally have access to that are now starting to access them, and we're seeing more and more people sign up from across the world. So I think the growth there is global, not just in the United States. There's a question here on so the gainful employment and the future of that. I think that's an excellent question. And rather than take that on myself, that's something I'm going to put forward back to everyone that's participating. I'm going to give my opinion on that. I think gainful employment is going to be something that's very much front and center for 2017. It's a huge part of the economic policy and what the new administration is trying to undertake. I think the idea of what employment and the signals for gainful employment for employers are what are most important here. Traditionally, we had people coming out of higher education institutions, four-year degrees with a bachelor's, with sort of jobs that were tailored to their experience. What's happening now is the actual job market is changing faster than curriculums and training have actually evolved. And so in order for universities and higher education to stay relevant for employers, our methods and our training and our signals for employers that students are trained, I think have to evolve as well. That's just something that I see as a young grad and seeing, anecdotally from people that I know in the industry, but I'd love to hear your feedback on this as well. There's a question here on the future of the Ulala platform. I think that's a very good one. I think mobile platforms are mobile today, but in truth they are experience management platforms. And while mobile is the heart of how students are communicating today, we are inherently a student experience and a student success platform. And so as these new technologies evolve, we very much see ourselves being involved in those emerging technologies and making sure that we're shaping student experience in the way that's engaging with students where they are. The key thing here is students will be moving very, very quickly. The question is, can we as an industry move quickly with them in order to keep servicing them as best as possible? So those are some of the first few rounds of questions that we got, and thank you for those. Very exciting. I'd encourage you to keep sending those in, and we can certainly provide a forum to have more of these discussions in the future as well. For the time being, I'm going to move on now, for the interest of time, to our next section, which is going to be talking about higher education administration. So we're going to look now, taking a step away from the students themselves to actually on the back end and operations administration side. So what do we see as the biggest thing? So number 6 out of our top 10 and coming in on administration is predictive analytics and data. I think this has been a buzzword very much in 2015, and 2016 in most industries. But I think higher education administration is really on the precipice of using this for how they do make decisions in their institutions. We talked about how accreditation and funding have become more challenging. There's a lot fewer federal dollars out there in the pot to be distributed, and so being able to demonstrate outcomes, being able to demonstrate success is going to be critical at making a case for the viability of our institutions. And so our very approach to how we impact engagement, how we impact attrition rates, how we impact graduation rates, what are we doing from an intervention standpoint, from a predictive analytics standpoint, to identify these, intervene, and make sure we don't lose those students. All of those things are going to be critical for institutions to become much more operationally efficient, excuse me, much more operationally efficient and much more focused on the efficacy of their students. So we'll see automation start to come into place. Predictive analytics are going to make tasks simpler, faster, and more efficient. One example we saw of this at McGill University, for example, was the ability for orientation leaders and the administration during orientation to be able to answer students' questions on a campus feed on their app. Now, this may sound like a very simple change, but if you think about it on a grand scale, for a student affairs leader to have to address each student individually on the question of where can I find this information takes a lot of time. But if that administrator is able to answer one question publicly, not only does it answer all the kids that may be asking that question, but it suddenly empowers the kid that was asking that question to become an arbiter of that information as well. And so these sorts of automations using technology to make our processes more efficient is going to be critical. So we see as CIO at Stony Brook, pointed out that 2017, we can count on an increased focus on the use of predictive analytics in how institutions achieve their strategic goals. Now, we have a question here before I move on. It's just saying that the sound went out. I just want to make sure everybody else can hear clearly. So if you can't hear, please do let me know. For anyone that is experiencing sound troubles, what I would recommend is maybe just logging off and logging back on. Sometimes that works. Or making sure your speakers are fully turned up. Okay? So we're going to move on here. So number 7, again, now we're getting towards the administrative side. We talked about becoming more operationally efficient. We talked about the lack of federal funding dollars sometimes. One of the things institutions are going to have to do as a result of all of this is become more strategic about where their revenues are coming from. Now, most institutions rely fundamentally on philanthropy, tuition, and federal funding, but we're going to have to start thinking more innovatively about partnerships, about other ways to increase revenues in order to divest some of the risk associated with focusing simply on enrollment numbers or on the generosity of our alumni. Endowment incomes are one way of looking at this, and we can see smarter investments in green technology, investments in emerging technology in emerging countries as being a good way to drive more recurring revenue. But the other way is looking at operational efficiency. Now, this was a survey done on university business, and what they found was, 9 out of 10 presidents, chancellors, provosts, so we're talking senior administration here, 9 out of 10 of them saw operational efficiency as a critical way to improve their institution's cost-cutting and revenue-saving measures. This is very, very important because this affects not just those financial departments, but really every single department in the institution. How can we think about operating our department and how we engage students in a more efficient way? Are there things that we can automate? Are there things that we can remove? These are questions that we're going to have to start asking. And I put this up, the third bullet point, because it's something that's indicative in most organizations. Salaries and people make up the most important part of that organization. But having worked in higher education myself for a very long time, I know what the implication or the perception of higher education salaries are and of employees in higher education. Tenure and the idea that people that work in universities are there for life. These perceptions exist outside of our industry and our institution. So we have to be very, very cognizant of making sure we can demonstrate the outcome and the impact of what it is that we do and what it is that our salaries are paying for. So How do we in student affairs, how do we in the CIO office, how do we in marketing and comms, how do we in academic affairs demonstrate an ROI on the investment made on our salary? This will be a key part and something that's going to come under the microscope in 2017. And now moving towards like the last two aspects of what we can expect, we go to student success. This is something that I'm sort of culminating towards because it's what we live for. I'm fairly certain it's why most of the people attending today are in the industry that they're in. I certainly know it's why I'm in this industry, and that's to impact student experience, to make sure that every single kid, or at least one student, that we can affect their life by having them have a good experience through university, a successful experience, a successful journey. So what does that look like in 2017? The first thing we have to recognize is education is no longer a cookie cutter approach. It has to be personalized in order to have an impact. Millennials and Gen Z students are motivated by experiences over achievements or material outcomes. They're looking to be moved. They're looking to be experiencing something that they can tell as a story or feel like their life has purpose later down the road. And college is no different. You know, we often tout that the college experience or what the university experience is a huge part of what it is that the university or the college offers. But what does that really mean? How is it tailored to each institution? How is it tailored to each individual? Are we providing the same experience to everyone? And is that really as inclusive as we can be? Obviously, this doesn't mean trampling on the values that have, you know, brought the institution to where it is. But how do we bring people in to understand the values of the institution, but make sure that they have a successful journey? And that really comes from personalization. You know, understanding what is the origin of the student, what are they trying to achieve from college? You know, are they looking to get a job? Are they a first-generation student? And what is their background in terms of the type of education they received? Are they coming for retraining? Are they coming from a rural or an urban background? Are they the first kid in their family to go to university? All of these questions now have significant impact on how students experience university. And so we've seen personalization. You know, if you think of your Starbucks profile and how your order can be ready for the second you walk in the store, or to Amazon and Alexa, how your music preferences and your shopping preferences are all built in. The way you learn and what you learn should be no different, and students expect it to be no different. So that's something that we now have to look at very, very seriously in 2017. So all of the events, all of the workshops, the co-curricular activities, course management, course load management, tutoring, it cannot be a one-stop shop anymore. It has to be personalized. And how we do that brings us to point number 9. You know, student success tools have to enter the mainstream. We've all grown up, you know, in this space, learning about SIS systems and student information systems, understanding learning management systems and seeing how those have evolved. In 2017, we're going to see the student experience management system come into play. This is going to be critical. The tools that give administrators and the institution the ability to affect, understand, analyze the student experience is going to shape how well that institution performs in 2017. Students are looking for a personalized experience. That doesn't happen by accident. It happens when the infrastructure is set up in order to make that take place. SIS systems and LMS systems were designed as data gathering and data management systems for their domain. There has never been a student experience management system that is as complete until now. And as we move towards this, these tools to track engagement, provide service assessment, program assessment, analytical insight on the student experience, these on an individual level are going to be critical. And these are the way that institutions are going to be able to not only separate themselves from the mainstream in terms of enrollment numbers, in terms of making sure that they're getting the best student body to actually attend the institution, but in demonstrating their success in the industry, whether it's for federal funding dollars, whether it's for research, whether it's for being a pioneer and paving the way. These tools are going to become critical for an institution's success in 2017. And the last point here, before I go to it, I want to point out how all of these things are not really in isolation. It really is coming from a culmination of systemic changes that have been happening in the industry over time, but also external changes to which higher education has typically, historically been very, very sheltered against or protected from, are now starting to creep and permeate into how we operate. So higher education needs to step out of the shadows in which it used to operate and really join private industry, innovation, small emerging technologies, startups. All of these have to be key partners in order for higher education to succeed in this day and age. And number 10 is going to be the reason why. Number 10 in our list is the potential existential threat to higher education. And now, before I reveal what that is, I know I've built up a lot of tension here. I just want to make sure there's no questions or comments on the first 9. So we've already seen things on student success now, on educational administration, on public policy, on educational technology. I just want to know if you have any thoughts on this, if you have any questions before I reveal that last bit. Feel free to chat in, and if you have a comment, I'm happy to share that with the rest of the groups. If you want to just comment that in, happy to do that too. So I'm just going to give a couple seconds now for that. Okay, so it looks like everyone's excited for that big reveal, because it seems like no one wants to waste any more time on the remaining 9, and we can move on to the number 10. So what is this existential potential, I should say? It is not an existential threat, but it potentially could be. It's the reality that we have to adapt or die. And this is finally a reality for higher education. And not just community colleges, not just for-profit colleges, not just for large public or private research institutions. This is for our industry as a whole. It is being shaken up today. The example I'm giving here is 42 University. This was established back in 2013 by a billionaire out of France. Now, what this institution is a coding university that is established in Silicon Valley, that is entirely tuition free. It costs $0 to attend. This is the potential future of education, where it is crowdsourced. It is something that is not simply created by years and years and years of trust and years of philanthropic donations and building a legacy. It can be started in a flash. And the biggest prediction for 2017 is that this will not be the first, this will not, I guess it was the first, but it will certainly not be the last institution such as this that will come into play. We can expect to see more of these and more students enrolling in these, more students attending these, and more students graduating from these and getting employment from these institutions. And that provides a real eye-opener for higher education as an industry. The paragon of what we used to be is no longer the same. We always looked at higher education as the final word, the methodical, researched, academic, cool mind looking at something. That is slowly changing. Higher education has to be forward thinking, has to be adaptive, has to be critical thinking. And that's something that we have to adapt towards, or go by the wayside. And not necessarily entirely, but certainly in terms of enrollment numbers, in terms of federal funding, which are effectively, the lifeblood of an institution. So that was the 10th one and the largest one. And I'm cognizant here of time, so we're just past the 1:45 mark. So I'm going to do a quick recap. And before we go to your Q&A, I'm just going to give you a quick glance of what we covered today. So we had a quick look back at 2016 and some of the changes that we saw, such as IFTs shutting down, diversity and sexual awareness in Title IX becoming key important facets along with the CIO. We see for 2017 in public policy, accreditation and a focus on community colleges is going to be very, very important. As far as ed tech goes, that multiple device penetration, it's no longer just a laptop or even a smartphone. It's about the tablets, it's about wearables, it's about IoT devices. We see virtual reality is becoming very, very important, and massive online courses becoming massive online degrees, along with non-traditional sources of credentials like badges and certifications. As far as administration goes, predictive analytics and data has to be how we operate. This has to become something that everyone is comfortable with. There can no longer be just a data guy at the institution. There has to be a data culture. Everyone has to be a data person. And we're going to see that come into effect as far as revenue sources come for institutions as well. As they become more strategic about where revenue comes from, salaries and the way that we bring those in is going to become more and more important. As far as student success goes, personalization is going to be the key. In terms of what students expect, they expect a personalized experience. They expect a tailored experience. How do we deliver that? Well, that's the 9th thing, and that is student experience management tools. The ability for administrators not only to engage with students, but to proactively intervene where they see drop-off, to proactively ensure that students are on established pathways, and any divergence can give them predictive machine learning sort of ways to come back onto that guided pathway. These are going to be critical. And then lastly, as we said, adapt or die is the new normal. This is something that is a culmination of everything else that we see in 2017 that's happening. It's not going to happen in January or February, but by this time next year, institutions that have adapted to these realities are going to be the ones that we see as the most successful. So on that note, before I turn to your questions, I just want to say thank you for attending today. Really appreciate everyone that joined for the first time, everyone that's coming back to one of our webinar series. It really does, it's super enjoyable for me to actually put these on for you. So I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to sit through, and I hope you learned something interesting, hope you learned something different, and looking forward to having you back for the next one. If you want to get in touch with us, we're happy to take questions on any of these. If you want to learn more about our service or our product, you can go to our website, ulalamobile.com, fill out a request for a demo there to get in touch, or give us a call directly at 1-877-588-7508. We have our account executives and mobile education consultants on standby. They're happy to answer any questions that you have, not just about the presentation today, but about our platform, where we're going. And if you have any thoughts on educational technology yourself, those are the right people to share it with. Now, on that note, we have about 10 minutes left. I'm going to say thank you one last time, and I'm going to turn it over to you guys for any questions you might have. So go ahead and chat those in the question section on the right. So let's see if we have any questions here. Okay. So it seems like The only other question that we're getting now, because it seems like we addressed most of them, is kind of the future of mobile technology, and whether or not that's something that is going to be. I just want to make sure I get it correctly. Yeah. Where's mobile as a platform going? Um, I think that is best answered by looking at how we use mobile in our daily lives. It is an extension of us. It's an extension of our personality, of our experience. We use it for everything from ordering a cab to booking a restaurant reservation. And so students expect mobile to be the same way for a college or university. They expect to be able to do everything at the touch of a button. They expect to be able to communicate with their administrators, with their peers, with their tutors. And so the platform, while it's mobile today, I think it's more about the experience. It's more about how we use mobile. It's that extension of ourselves. Whether it's virtual reality, whether it's Internet of Technology objects, whether it's wearables, all of these things are potential future platforms. For us, we are always keeping an eye on these, and we are always developing for the future. But today, first and foremost, mobile is the way to engage students because that's where they are. So mobile's not going away anywhere, but it's certainly something to be mindful of for the future. Okay, so I don't see any more questions coming in, so I'm gonna let everyone go a little bit early and give yourself an extra 7 minutes in your day. Just want to say thank you again for tuning in and for coming out. There's going to be a recording of the webinar and the slides being sent out tomorrow. If you have any questions, feel free to get in touch. Ulalamobile.com. And thank you, and look forward to seeing you next time. Take care, everybody. Bye now.